All right, we're officially recording. So I want to welcome everybody to the first of what will be a daily learning sessions online. This is a joint project of Jewish National Fund and Alexander-AMHSI High School in Israel, which I'll talk about in a second. Let me just tell you a little bit about myself, and I'll introduce our teacher for the day. So I'm Greg Likovsky. I'm the National Director of Recruitment for Alexander-AMHSI High School in Israel. I'm a MUS alum myself in the fall of '92, on the Quinn of '92. And in fact, I have sitting next to me my source books from when I went that I saved and still use for when we teach. So for all of you recent alumni, these should look slightly familiar. I doubt when the Torah talked about gathering the people together and said, Hakel et ha'am, I doubt this is what the Torah had in mind. While we are not able to gather in person these days, because of all that is going on in the world, we are truly blessed to be able to gather virtually via our technology and really the world in which we live. It truly is unprecedented times. For the first time in our history, we've had to bring our students home early, which was hard and sad. And in light of everything that is going on, we thought what a wonderful way to help continue to spread the MUS magic than to go online and to gather virtually. So this is the first session of a daily 1 o'clock every day, same time, same Zoom link, for us to come together with our amazing MUS educators and learn from them and learn together and from one another. As I mentioned, this is a joint project of Jewish National Fund and Alexander-AMHSI High School in Israel. JNF was founded in 1901. Jewish National Fund's passion, commitment, and vision for the future of Israel and the Jewish people has remained clear and unwavering. We are the your voice in Israel. And of course, Alexander-AMHSI High School in Israel has been around for almost 50 years. We are the ultimate college prep study abroad adventure in Israel. And when all of this started happening, we had over 200 students on campus from around the country and around the world. So it really is really awesome to be together virtually, as much as we would love to be together in person. So as we kick off these online learning sessions that are joint between JNF and AMHSI, what better way we thought to do it than invite teacher, rabbi, friend extraordinaire, Rabbi Lior Sinai, who is our co-CEO at Alexander-AMHSI High School in Israel. Just gonna briefly read his bio and then set some standards for us together on this Zoom call. Rabbi Sinai is originally from New York. He made Aliyah, moving with his family in June of 2011. As a young adult, he was involved in New York City's nightlife as a club producer and MC. In 1995, that all changed while he spent the academic year abroad studying at Haifa University in Israel. He returned to the States and completed his BA with a major in Jewish studies and minor in theater from the City University of New York's Hunter College. He's previously worked in the fields of leadership development, organizational advancement, and consulting. He decided to continue his education at the Jewish Theological Seminary of America, receiving ordination and a master's in Hebrew letters in 2009. He continues to work passionately on building a network of partners with Israel as its center of focus on Jewish continuity and Israel connectivity for generations to come. He has been with Alexander-AMHSI High School in Israel since 2013, and it is awesome and fun and such a joy and a blessing to be able to work with Lior day in and day out in everything that we do. So before I turn it over to Rabbi Sinai, what I want to ask is, or let everyone know is, everyone will be on mute. And if you want to ask a question, down at the bottom of the page of your Zoom link, there is a little smiley face. You can put your thumbs up to ask a question. I think my thumbs up just came up. Or you can re-click it to go down. You can also, in the chat where it says everyone, just say, you know, I have a question. Again, I want to remind everybody that we are recording this call. The hope is that this will be not just Lior and our teachers every day speaking to us, but really engaging in a dialogue and a conversation about issues around Israel and Israel education. And without further ado, I will turn it over to Lior Sinai. Now we should all applaud.
No, that's okay. Thank you, Greg. And it's so great to see so many of you colleagues, friends, alumni. I saw a couple of HSI t-shirts out there, so way to represent, and educators who have joined us. we are, I'm just going to take a couple of minutes here just to kind of get us into this. We are in extremely unprecedented times. I mean, you can look throughout history to try to nail down when it was a time like this, where we weren't quite sure of what will be tomorrow, right? It might seem like we're not in control. We have no choice in the matter. Not simple. We find ourselves at our homes. We here in Israel have been now relegated to be home for over, I think it's close to 10 days now. Travel restrictions, of course, have been in place for now a couple of weeks. And it's not easy. It's not simple. But there's also an opportunity here. And you've probably seen this written on Facebook posts. You've probably heard some other rabbi or educator or someone talk about this. It's quite interesting, actually, the time that we find ourselves in, if we look at it as an opportunity to regain our humanity. For way too long, we've lived in this rat race, and God knows what we're chasing. Working really hard, whether it's in the for-profit, nonprofit sector, in our lives, in our careers. What are we chasing? Complaining among each other about the lack of time we have to be with loved ones, missing bath time with your children, or a date with your partner. And now all of a sudden to find that we've got all the time in the world. It's phenomenal. It's scary, but it's, on the other hand, quite extraordinary and phenomenal. And I just want to start us off with thinking about people who are suffering. There are people right now, people we know, people we don't know, who are suffering, people who are alone, people who are exposed to corona, people who have caught the virus, people on ventilators. It's trying times, and I think one of the things that we have an opportunity to do in times like these, where we come together as a community, albeit virtually, but nonetheless, here we are. I see you, you see me. There's something powerful about the spirit. And I think that's something that we are all recognizing here. There's a level of an emotional intelligence that's coming to the surface here, where we are relying more on our intuition, on our compassion for others, reaching out to help others. And one of the things I want us to try to do right now is to think of someone or someone's people who need a good word, who might even need a prayer for healing, for refuah shlema, for healing. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to recite the prayer for healing in English so everyone can understand. We'll all be on the same page here. And when I pause midway through, I'd like you to recite those names out loud. It doesn't matter that you're on mute, but I do believe that our words have power. Words have tremendous power. And just saying that word as it leaves our body, leaves our mouth, that word goes on to have a life of its own. So when I recite this blessing, I'd like for us to be able to focus here and meditate on those people who need a good word, those people who need a blessing for healing before we get started with our learning. May the one who is blessed, our ancestors, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, and Leah, bless and heal those who are ill. May the Blessed Holy One be filled with compassion for their health, to be restored, and their strength to be revived. May God swiftly send them a complete renewal of body and spirit. V'nomar Amen. Okay, what is Zionism and where does it come from? Now, this is an entire course that can take up to 4 months at the very least, an entire semester at AMHSI, right? So what is Zionism and where does it come from? I want to actually open that up because we're going to try to make this as conversational as possible to the extent that we can. So if you want to type it in the chat, if you want to just unmute yourself or however that works and speak it out. But what is Zionism and where did this come from? It didn't just start 100 and so years ago with Herzl, right? So any of our alumni out there, any educators out there, anyone who want to just share, where did Zionism come from and how did it start?
You can unmute yourselves or raise your hand or do in the chat. And if Lior doesn't get answers, I know he's going to start calling on people that he recognizes.
Well, we do have AMHSI teachers on the call, which I can see. So Benji Berman, where does Zionism come from and how did it all start? Unmute yourself.
Wait 1 second.
I unmuted
There you
you,
go.
Benji. Go ahead.
Oh, hi. Hi, everyone. I was being annoying, so I said Abraham.
Avraham, tell us how. Abraham, our first patriarch.
Abraham. You know, this is the story of Zionism comes all the way back from the Bible, the relationship between the Jewish people and the land of Israel. The belief that the Jewish people have got a place in the land of Israel comes from the Tanakh, from our Bible, and the first Jew to make Aliyah, if you like, to have this relationship with the land was Abraham.
So Abraham, right? When God says, "Kum veitalech ba'aretz," right? Arrive and walk the land, right? For you, this is the essence. This is the first steps of Zionism, right? Coming to the land. Very good. Anyone else? Anyone else want to share where the word Zionism comes from? Yes, Liam Reese, alumni, AMHSI.
One thing I like to think about with Zionism is it comes from a place of a need for survival, and that we need Zionism so we can prosper, so we can have a place where we are safe.
Okay, so I'm done with my lesson now. I really appreciate that, Liam. You know, you really jumped ahead with this whole conversation. I'm just kidding, but Liam definitely took this term and understanding of Zionism to where, let's say, the leadership in the 1800s took it to, right? This notion of a political entity, a place where we need to have a space of our own, where we can control our own destiny, right? Following, of course, history and all that we know has happened to us throughout history. But let's take another step back. Between Abraham and the 1800s, right? So the word Zionism, it's actually a word that is derived from referring to Jerusalem, from Yerushalayim. And we actually find the word Zion, we find it 150 times in the Tanakh. The Tanakh is the Torah, Nevi'im, Tuvim, the Bible, right? The written works and the prophets. But it's actually not in the Torah itself. It's not in the 5 books. It's actually found more often in the Nach, in the books of the prophets and the scriptures, the writings. And it's found over 150 times. How do I know that? Well, I'm not going to reach over to my library, but there's something called the concordanatia. It's a concordation of all the words and the number of times they're found in the Bible. So I just opened it up. I looked for the word Zion, and there it was, over 150 times found in not the Torah 5 books, but in the prophets and in the books of the writings, right? That's where the term actually comes from, and it refers to Jerusalem. It refers to Jerusalem. It actually specifically, the term Zionism, not as an ideology, right? Because that's where we often take things, right? We're a people of the book, and we like to negotiate. We like to ask questions, and we like to struggle with the text. And from that, of course, we extract meaning, purpose, stories, midrash, right? Dvar Torah. When a rabbi reads a verse in a Torah and then on for a 45-minute lecture about it, that's that rabbi's description or understanding of what that text is. So I go with Benji as well and say Abraham was the first Zionist, right? God said, "Kum veitalech la'aretz," get up and go and walk the land, right? Walk the land. It's an action-oriented approach to doing things. Zionism is about taking action, but the actual term Zion, right? That comes later on. That comes later on, and it actually specifically refers to the highest point of the hilltop of Jerusalem, where the city of David was built. The highest point in Jerusalem where the city of David was built, that was called Zion. And the word Zion actually refers to that pinnacle, that top part, right? Again, I just looked it up, so you can look it up yourself. A lot of this stuff is available to you. We're just having a conversation about it. I'm no genius here. All the information out there is available to you as well, right? And that's where the term Zion actually begins, as it refers to the city of David. And that's where we find it in the latter books, not in the first 5 books of Moses or the Torah as we know it, but in the latter books. Okay, that's where the term Zion comes from. Of course, moving on forward, as we experienced post-exile, right? Who remembers, for our alumni out there as a question, when did the exilic period actually begin, if you will, right? When was the exile of 2,000 years? When did that start for Am Yisrael, for the people of Israel? Who remembers the year? Who remembers the period? Around what time? When was that? Anyone? A little hint, there was a second temple destruction. You guys remember that?
We've got somebody in the comments, 586 BCE.
Okay, that's the first one. Okay, thank you, Rick, you cheater.
And then the second is 70 CE.
70 of the Common Era. So look at these dates. 586 before the Common Era. That's 2,000, do the math, over 2,000, a couple of hundred years back. Just think about how far back our history goes, just with regards to the first and second temples, right? And now we're jumping forward to post-zero, so 70 of the Common Era, right? That's the second temple destruction. And that's when we talk about the period of exile, when for 2,000 years, Am Yisrael, the people of Israel, are scattered around the world to all 4 corners of the earth. For another lesson, another discussion is how in the world did we keep up with our Jewish practice? How in the world did we communicate with each other, right? There was no fax machine, right? There was no email or WhatsApp group or Zoom. Hey guys, here's the latest, halacha, right? Here's the latest observance, from Yemen to Poland to who knows where we were in the world. How did we keep up with this? And by the way, even more fascinating, in 1948, when Am Yisrael, when the Jewish people, the ingathering of the exiles, when we came back home to the state of Israel, and every one of these peoples were coming from countries around the world, and they brought their Torah scroll with it. Every Torah scroll had the exact wording on it. How did we accomplish that? How did we share the word? Hey, Shlomizel, like this is the right wording for. No, you made a mistake here. Somehow we ingathered. After all these years of exile, we came back home. Every one of these peoples of Am Yisrael from around the world, from countries all over, brought their Torah scrolls in arm, right? In arm. And it was all the same. How did we accomplish these things? And again, this is a topic which fascinates me, and I hope it does you as well. And that's something to add, I think, for, Greg, if you want to write that down for another lesson, maybe we'll talk about Jewish continuity for thousands of years. How did we make that possible? Right, with social distancing a fact of life back then, and Jews scattered all over the world, and no technology to even be able to communicate these things. So fast forwarding post 2,000 years, leading up to the 2,000 years of exile, and all that our people have experienced throughout our history and the challenges, right? There began to grow a popularity of Zionism as a movement, right? An ideology. We see this beginning to develop in Eastern Europe in around the late 19th century, 1800s, mid to late 1800s. And by the way, this is open the conversation. So anyone who wants to add anything on the chat or unmute yourself, just blurt it in. I'm no expert. I'm just here to have an awesome discussion and conversation with you all. Maybe we learn something together. But around the mid 1800s, late 19th century is when Zionism was extracted in the biblical sense to become something, a national movement, an ideology, starting in Eastern Europe, promoting the national settlement of the Jewish people in their homeland. But not only the national resettlement of Am Yisrael, the Jewish people in their homeland, but also the culture and the revitalization and cultivation of Hebrew as a spoken language.
Hi.
Because it was until this point in time for, Lucy, did you want to say something?
Wait, your name is?
Okay. We'll get back to you. I can't hear you. You're muted.
What's your name?
My name is Lior. Hi.
Lior Sinai, right?
That's right. Like the mountain.
Oh, okay.
Welcome to the club. So, Zionism began to take on this national ideology around the mid-1800s, late 19th century, where Hebrew was again now recaptured and adopted and taken from a religious or a sacred language, right, adopted into more of a national language, cultivated to be used on a day-to-day basis. The groups collectively who formed this ideology or this movement were known as Ohavei Tzion, or the lovers of Zion. Now, there's a lot of information about this, a lot of books to be read. There's Arthur Hertzberg's The Zionist Idea. If you don't know this one, I actually have a few different versions of it. Not long ago, there's a new book by David Hazony, Yoram Hazony, and Michael Oren, which is New Essays on Zionism, right? I have that version, Benji. I have that version too. So there's a lot of books out there to read. And one other book, before I know I'm jumping around, but I tend to do that. One other book that I want to recommend to you to try to check out. One second. One other book that I'd like to suggest you consider reading, actually there's no cover on it, but it is the Memoirs of David Ben-Gurion. The Memoirs of David Ben-Gurion, and I see I mark it up here. I've read it over and over at least 6, 7 times. Phenomenal read for Israel's first prime minister who was not religious and who would talk about how he'd walk around with the Tanakh, with the Torah under his arm as he toured the land as his rite of passage. Phenomenal, phenomenal story. So Zionism now begins to develop in the late 1900s with groups that are collectively known as lovers of Zion, Ohavei Tzion. And they were seen as themselves encountering what they saw as the losing of the Jewish identity and aspiration of Am Yisrael, as they saw it in Europe. Of course, we know the father of modern Zionism was Theodor Herzl, right? Herzl, if we don't know, who was Herzl? Came from Vienna, Austria, right? A secular Jew, a journalist, having nothing to do with national movements or aspirations to go home. What does he do? He goes to cover the Dreyfus affair, right? The trials of the Jewish Colonel Dreyfus, and as he's covering these affairs, and of course there's a longer story to it, what does he do? He sees and he witnesses the people, the throngs of the people outside of the courthouse screaming, hang the Jew, death to the Jew. And this secular Jew who isn't so educated begins to realize, you know what? The world doesn't want us. No matter how hard we try, we've adopted German as our language. We've taken on German culture. We've made every effort to assimilate, not prohibit assimilation, but dafka go against effort to assimilate. Let's be like everyone else. And nonetheless, still, the world finds a way to blame the Jew for all its ills. Now, there's a whole text out there, right? And of course, Herzl goes on and he writes, Der Judenstaat, the Jewish state, right? And he talks about his imagination of what this Jewish state would look like one day. And in 1897, if you think that you can't make a change, if you think that you as an individual person can't be the change, this guy, okay, somehow, of course, there's a whole story behind it, but somehow gets the leaders of Judaism from all over to come together in Basel, Switzerland for the first Zionist Congress, right? What we're now hearing about on Facebook and other social media platforms to vote for the World Zionist Organization. He holds what is to become the first Zionist Congress in Basel, Switzerland. It's a fascinating story, and I recommend you read up on it, whether it's to get a book about it. Of course, you know you have time for it, or whether it's online, Google and search it. It's a fascinating story how he goes about it. And here, by the way, we're talking about 1890s. There too, there was no fax machine. There was no mail. There was no WhatsApp group. There was no social media. Somehow, here too, he gets all these Jewish leaders to come together to Basel, Switzerland. Fascinating story. And herein lies the beginning of what becomes a formal movement. If up until this point in time, there is talk about it, right? Zionist leaders, young people like yourselves out there, people in their teens, in their mid to late teens, are getting together, right? They want to be the change. They believe in themselves. They want to do something good for their people. They're gathering in the cafes, in the restaurants. They're talking about Zionism. this sort of inspiration. All of a sudden, they have what to look forward to. If you could imagine, anyone out there, what the world must have looked like without an Israel. We take it for granted that Israel exists. But if you could imagine back then what the world looked like without an Israel, you wouldn't be walking with your heads held up so high. None of us would be. So to imagine what these young people were going through as they were imagining what Zionism could be, the idea, the romantic vision of going home, of tilling the land, of getting your hands dirty, of defending yourselves, not having to rely on a host country you happen to live in, right? To hope and to fight for your rights. Here you have self-determination, something Am Yisrael longed for 2,000 years. By the way, I never forgot, which is another amazing topic for discussion. How did we not forget? And here they are, and it culminates with the start of this official national movement, right, called Zionism, the Zionist movement, spearheaded by Theodor Herzl, and of course the leaders who supported him. And some might argue that there were other Zionist leaders ahead of Theodor Herzl, and again, that's a lot of information out there for you all to look up, and I recommend that you read about it. So I want to pause for a moment and open it up for any comments, any questions, anything anyone wants to share before I get into the different types of Zionism that I want to share with you.
Do your best to either raise your hand or make a comment. Yes, David.
I wanted to add something to David Ben-Gurion. I don't know if you know that, but even though he was not a religious person, he always had his Bible on his desk. This is something that I did for a while as well. And I copied from him, not only his name, but this custom to have the Bible on my desk. So this is pretty amazing for a secular person to hold the Bible on his desk.
Thank you. Anyone? Yes, Jackson.
Oh, cool. I can unmute myself. I was going to say, David, also something to add to what you said. And this talk about Ben-Gurion and his Bible kind of makes me think, and Lior, I wonder if you could touch a little more on like some of the background to this. But I personally, and I know a lot of people that think the same way, see Zionism as kind of no more than an indigenous rights movement, if that makes sense. And so I wonder if you could touch on a little bit of how that impacts sort of how we view the state, how we view the right of existence, those kinds of things in a modern world.
Very good. I'll keep that question to mind and we'll get to it in a second. Anyone else have any questions or comments? You could just unmute yourself. Great. Jackson, before we get into your question and comment, because that's going to take up some more of our time, and I want to get into that. And I think, how long do I have? Like 3 hours for this, Greg? Yeah. All right. Cool.
Half an hour or so.
Does anybody else have anywhere to go?
Honestly, no.
No, we have scheduled until about 2 o'clock.
Good. Excuse me. So I really want to be able to open this up and really talk about what Zionism means to us and what we think it should mean and where it went and how it evolved. But before I do that, and I'm not going to get into the definitions, to the extended definitions of each one of the different kinds of Zionism that exist, but I'm going to touch on them just so we get an understanding of which, because even though Am Yisrael to a certain extent rallied around this movement, because remember, if you were living during those times, pretty much no matter where you were in the world, remember, Israel doesn't exist. You do not have the same rights as others in your own country, even though you were born in these countries, your grandparents were born in these countries, right? Nonetheless, while everyone get around this, as you could imagine, right, there's the joke, of course, right, 2 Jews, 3 opinions, yada, 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 right? And to this day, of course, here we are in Israel. We haven't had a solid government in some time now. God willing, we're going to get there, of course, too, all given the challenges that we face, because that's the most important thing, is unity today. But even back then, there were different perspectives of Zionism. There was the labor Zionism, or socialist. There was liberal Zionism. There were revisionist Zionism. And then, of course, moving forward to today, there was religious Zionism. Green Zionism, and post-Zionism, although someone out there might have another Zionism that you might have created. And I think that in today's world, where everyone is not so interested in, let's call it, I don't know, name branding or party affiliation or denominational affiliation, you know, you might be this way, but you'll prefer it that way. I mean, whatever it is. There were all kinds of approaches and philosophies behind Zionism, right? So if labor Zionism, you can imagine what labor means, right? Believing, of course, that the Jew no longer had a place in Eastern Europe, right? That they were no longer wanted. Believed that a revolution of the Jewish soul, now the language that was interesting that I found out there, the revolution of a Jewish soul, and this is not a religious Zionist party, right? But that this aspiration, the zeitgeist, requiring Jews to move to the land of Israel. And while they're doing that, to become the active participants of realizing this 2,000-year-old dream, liot am chofshi be'artzenu, to be a free nation in our land, finally. So they wanted to become farmers, agriculturalists, workers, and become soldiers. Excuse me. To become soldiers in their own country. This was an original view stipulated by Theodor Herzl. And these views served as the seed, as Israel's original Labor Party. By the way, the party that held power until 1977. And since then, not much has gone on with it, and we know where the Labor Party is today, to a certain extent. Leading up to liberal Zionism. Liberal Zionism, which many might say, and you'll find different texts, which is why it's always important to cross-check and read up on various approaches. And remember, the authors who write this often will infuse their own subjectivity. It's very difficult to get an objective accounting for all these things. After all, his story is his story, right? So always keep that in mind when you're reading texts and when you're learning about history, is that everyone is able to infuse their perspective on things, right? So liberal Zionism, which was the dominant trend leading up to the first Zionist Congress in 1897. Not necessarily related to any specific party in Israel we find today, but identified with the original tenets of a democratic society, advocating for the rights of all, advocating the need for a Palestinian state, affirming free market, social justice, right? The government that had to be independent of religion, which is also a kind of philosophy that was identified with by Herzl and Chaim Weizmann. Some of these things I'm sharing with you today might not make sense and fit in with a specific party, because you might on the one hand believe that we have to live in Israel and have our rights to our own, security, our own defense. While on the other hand, you might be liberal in certain views, but on the other hand, Israel must maintain its Jewish character. And then how do you do that, right? It's always important to make note of the fact that the times are changing, and there's always something to be added to it. I want to, before I continue, read what one of our colleagues who texted here, one of our illustrious educators, Akiva Gersh, wrote to everyone. I think it's important to remember that there were two main sections of Jews who were against Zionism. This was going to be, of course, something I was going to share in a second, but I think it's important to keep in your mind. The ultra-Orthodox, who were waiting for Mashiach to bring them home, by the way, to this day, and also the ultra-secularists, who were concerned that Zionism would lead to them losing their rights and opportunities that they were granted during the Enlightenment period. Interesting that these two main communities, not listening to the government of Israel today in terms of taking seriously the required quarantine. Thank you, Akiva, for that last comment. We all agree this is a challenge. Jackson Pincus, you're on the mic.
I was actually going to add to what Akiva said. One of the things that's always been interesting about these two groups to me is that, right, especially the ultra-Orthodox, right, default to this idea that the Mashiach will tell us when to go back to Israel, and until then, nothing is able to replace that. I wonder if it's ever occurred to some of these groups that the ability for us to establish this new Jewish state may have come from the Mashiach that they're waiting for, right? There's nothing in our text that says that, we're waiting for one specific person to come down from heaven. We're waiting for some sign, some set of circumstances to give us the ability to reestablish this homeland. we were given that set of circumstances, in the early 1900s when all these things sort of started to snowball. So I think it's really interesting that especially when you speak to the Orthodox, that they say they're waiting for this Mashiach, and yet we've been given the opportunity. And so who's to say that's not what they were waiting for?
Anyone want to react to that? Anyone? Okay. Well, you're right. Yeah, sorry, Sarah M.
Oh,
Okay, that was quick. Anyone else? Okay, I think the whole concept of Mashiach, by the way, is also an important topic, and maybe, Greg, that's another topic to add, is the essence of Mashiach and where that comes from, as we don't necessarily find it or see the in the Torah itself. And I think there's some interesting theological discussion that we can have about that, and its intersection with Christian theology, by the way, as well, and how Christian theology also impacts Jewish theology in our understanding and perception of, is there an afterlife, the afterlife, hell versus heaven, and so on and so forth. Greg?
I add one interesting piece about that too, is I often think about Zionism. In Jewish messianism, there's a couple of ideas of what the messianic is. Is it a rebuilding of what was, or is it a completely new era of something that is not known yet? And I think one of the advents of modern Zionism, especially in sort of some of the modern movements like Reform Judaism and even in conservative Judaism, the idea of not yearning for a Zionism of rebuilding the third temple or rebuilding a temple, but rather a Zionism of a land fulfilled of justice, a Zionism that is based around a universal truth of equality, but yet a specificity for the Jewish people. And I do think that there's something very much, and I'll speak personally, very much bound up in my own Zionism in terms of what is messianic hopefulism, what is the idea of the Jewish state for the people today and for tomorrow.
Thank you, Rabbi. And I do think that, there is a special space, I think, that we can have, and a lesson, I think, to be had about Mashiach, where this concept and idea comes from. Where is it rooted in text versus perhaps philosophy, theology, and what does it mean today? I remember when I was a kid growing up in Brooklyn, and I would go with my father to visit the Rebbe every Sunday, and I've collected many dollars since. I was told then that it's when every Jew in the world keeps Shabbat. And then last week, or this past Shabbat, with the whole Corona and everyone's restricted to home, I thought, you know what? Maybe that's Shabbat. Maybe everyone's keeping Shabbat. So all of a sudden that idea came back to me. There's a lot of ideas that could be shared about that, but I want to reserve that for another session, Greg, that we can have. And maybe because who knows, God willing, we'll be in this situation for many months to come. So we should have what to talk about and learn about together.
On that, I'm getting a lot of private texts about possible content for future sessions. Rather than email me or chat, I'm going to put my email again for everybody. Feel free to email me. We have lots of resources that we can absolutely put classes together. So please feel free to email me if you have ideas.
Great.
Thank you.
So for those of you who are on this, I'm hoping that by now you have received a listing of schedule of the various lessons that are coming in and are scheduled for the next couple of weeks, which are going to be phenomenal, and some of which does overlap as it regards Zionism. So I'm not going to get into some of these things, but just as an example, one of the lessons that you're going to be invited to are, for example, Israel's Constitution or Declaration of Independence. Sorry, no Constitution. That's our Torah, Declaration of Independence, which also kind of touches on the makeup of what this country needs to look like. So what I want to do now for the remaining 10 or so or 15 minutes that we have, number one is I want to ask you, what does Zionism mean to you? When I was a kid, it was all about Zionism. You have to make Aliyah, you have to live in Israel. Then it kind of morphed into, oh, well, you have to support Israel, no matter what, unconditionally, right? And then it was, you got to support Israel from afar, or you got to visit Israel once in your life, or once a year, or you have to financially support Israel. You got to donate to Zionism. There's always this kind of, I don't want to call it watering down, but kind of this morphing of what Zionism means. It started with this this essential notion, and maybe rightfully so, right, in the mid to late 1800s, where you got to make aliyah, right? Because Zionism was all about reclaiming our homeland, coming home. So you needed to make aliyah to do that. Well, today, as I often tell our students, we have enough Jews here for now, right? Be the future in your communities, right? That's kind of what we're trying to do at NF-AMHSI, right? Be your future leaders, because we need you to be strong so that we can be strong, and vice versa. But let me ask everyone on the call. We have over like 60 people or so, I think, on this call here. What does Zionism mean to you? You've got to have an opinion. Don't be shy, right? This is, be open. We're a family here. What does Zionism mean to you? Unmute yourself, type it into the chat. Anyway, we'll be reading it out loud. So tell us, what does Zionism mean to you?
It looked like Annie, 17, had wanted to add.
Just speak out.
So for me personally, Zionism is...
Wait, what's your name? I'm sorry, what's your name and where are you coming from?
My name is Annie. I'm from Lancaster, Pennsylvania, AMHSI, summer 2017.
Woo! Who is your teacher?
Reuben Sparrow, who I've seen every summer since in Israel.
Wow, Reuben. Reuben's still with us, yes.
Oh wait, one of my Madri just commented. From AMHSI. Oh, so for me, my Zionism's changed a little bit, coming to college campus and having to kind of discuss what Zionism is. And
where do you go to college?
I go to Cornell University.
Never heard of it. Go
on. So for me, Zionism is the desire to have a homeland in the land of Israel. It's not necessarily can be something with strict land borders. It's just the need to have a Jewish state in that land. And that's kind of morphed as my idea of what Zionism is, has morphed from AMHSI, coming to college and having to deal with people kind of telling me, what do you think Zionism is? Do you support it? So for me, it's really the right of the Jewish people to have a state, and a Jewish state in the land of Israel.
Very nice. The right to have a Jewish state in the land of Israel. Okay, who else? What does Zionism mean to you?
Leo, what about, I'm not sure if this is Zionism and you have to correct
Wait,
me.
what's your name? What's your name and where are you calling from?
My name is Ayala Marudi and I work in NF-AMHSI, and I love being on these calls, and thank you so much for finding that it would be the class and not just in the offices. So I was thinking more like about humanitarian Zionism with all the people around today, the fact that we have Israel as a nation state, the fact that we're going strong, we're no longer...
Ayala, it's hard to make you out. It's hard to make you out. I'm sorry, I can't hear you that well.
Can you hear me better now?
I think so. I don't know. Try to speak slower and into the phone.
Okay. So more from like a humanitarian perspective of Tikkun Olam, that today we have our state of Israel, but it's not just about us anymore. How can we help others? How can we help others in need? How can we help other rights of groups and minorities to make sure that, not just us as the Jewish people in our state are doing well, but we see it more as a group, and the diaspora, how can we help out other Jewish communities abroad? And it's kind of reached further than just Israel as a state, but more as a Jewish people. And what does that mean?
That's great, and I think what's great about your definition, Ayala, is that it's so different from what we heard just now from our alumna, who talks about Zionism being the right of the Jewish people to their homeland, and you're taking it to a very interesting place, which is about Zionism being a global movement, right, for tikkun olam, for bringing our expertise, if you will, or support, or just help, or tzedakah to the rest of the world. Very nice. Thank you. Who else? Who else? We got two interesting.
Hunter, go ahead. Just unmute yourself. Go ahead.
I attended HSI this past summer.
Who was
My
the teacher?
teachers were Danny and Akiva. And I think that Zionism, while it is the Jews' right to a homeland in Israel, it goes beyond that with our history since biblical times, and it is also our connection to the land of Israel itself.
So can I ask you, just challenge you on your point there? When you mean it extends beyond Israel, what does that mean? Your first comment.
Like, it extends beyond just our right to have a homeland in Israel. It is also the reason why we have a right to a homeland in Israel, which is our connection to the land.
And your teacher was Akiva?
Akiva and Danny.
All right, I'm gonna have to talk to him. Very good, Hunter. Thank you for sharing. Who else? Who else? What does Zionism mean to you? We have lay leaders on the call. We have professors on the call. We have donors on the call. We have alumni. We have educators. We have colleagues. Ronit, I saw you lift your hand, Ronit. Please unmute yourself. Can't hear you. You have to unmute your computer. There you go.
Yeah.
There you go. There you go.
Just a second.
All right.
Hi. Well, I just floated. I was born here and lived most of my life here, so I don't know anything but Zionism. I'm sorry, I don't even bother with that question, which is so obvious. This is all my being is Zionism.
Thank you. Thank you, Juanit. Who else? We'd like to get a couple more here. What does Zionism mean to you today? Maybe someone who lives elsewhere. Well, it doesn't matter where you live. Any other comments about what Zionism means to you today? Anything different than what we've heard today, perhaps? Be creative. This is your chance. There's no wrong answer.
Well, what's that thing back there? Oh, okay.
Hi, Mark.
We've got Mark Sachs floating
Mark,
in the
are you on the moon or something?
Yeah, where this backdrop came from. Susan, where did we find that?
That's awesome.
Cool. First, Kol HaKavod, Rabbi Lior, this is great. Thank you for doing this. So,
wait, where are you calling from?
From the Chicago, Illinois suburbs of Deerfield, Illinois.
Welcome.
Twice so from Earth.
It was snowing last night, so it's lovely here.
Hi.
So I agree with everything that's been said. And I guess I would add that for me, Zionism is the national liberation movement of the Jewish people. It's a place not only promised to us by Hashem in Tanakh, but also, so that's first point. Also, it's a place where the Jewish people have been able to and must always be able to not only survive, but thrive. So you talked, Lior, about the rebirth of modern Hebrew as a lingua franca. That's important. So to revive our historical language, where culture and music and science and technology and different forms of music and Jewish worship and davening can express itself. Most importantly for me, Israel always has to be a place where Jews can be safe and proud and have our own self-determination. We know that a stateless people, that a people without a homeland of their own is forever weak and vulnerable and at the whims of whatever tin pot dictator happens to come along. And history is, replete with that. So for me, Am Yisrael Chai is about all of that. And also it's a place where all of us, whether we live in Hod HaSharon or in Deerfield, Illinois, or anywhere else, can be part of the Zionist project. However, we can help strengthen Israel as a place for people who live there or don't live there. We're all in this together, and that sense of Kalal Yisrael centers for me around helping to build Israel as, as the Zionist project for all of us to live out our dreams in a place where the Jewish people can be safe and free.
Beautiful. Thank you, Mark. And please send my love to Susan as well.
I'm here.
I'm going to miss you guys on Passover, but next year.
We're going to miss you so much. We're going to miss you guys.
They were supposed to come to, Mark and Susan were supposed to be in Israel for Pesach, and we're going to spend Erev Pesach, the Seder, with my family and I. So we'll have to take a rain check for next year.
Thank you. We were looking
Absolutely.
forward to it. Thank you.
So let's get one or two more. But before we do that, let me just share with you here in the comments. Okay, I agree with Hunter. There's a great quote by Ben Gurion talking about how one of the main goals of the establishment of a Jewish state is to fulfill the goal and the role of being a light unto the nations. That's beautiful. Tanya, who writes this quote, speaks volume to her from Menachem Begin. We were granted the right to exist by God of our fathers at the glimmer of the dawn of human civilization nearly 4,000 years ago. For that right, which has been sanctified in Jewish blood and generation to generation, we have paid a price unexampled in the annals of nations. Jackson writes, a people without a land for a land without a people. I forget who said it, but it sums up what Zionism means perfectly. And then, of course, the quote from David Ben Gurion, first prime minister, who referred to the creation of the state of Israel as a great historic privilege, which is also the duty in helping to solve the central problems of humanity. So with that, you can continue sharing your views. What I'm going to do is I took a crack at this, actually, because I do believe that the essence of what Zionism means will never change, right? I mean, where it all started, it's there. Why it all started, right? Whether it's in the Bible, whether it's in the prophets, whether it was the national movement that started itself in the late mid 1800s, late 19th century, whether it is the move today, as Ayala had mentioned, to not only focus in or hone in on our own successes in order to make our world better and bring it to Tikkun Olam. Zionism in its essence as a space and place for Am Yisrael to rediscover, reclaim its ability to self-determinate its future will never change. And all these suggestions that are made, all the definitions that we find, and all the different parties that were created throughout the Zionist congresses that existed, from labor to religious to so on and so forth, will always be there. It's only about building upon that, right? The Torah is there. We can't deny it. We can't throw it out the window. We can't just chuck it because it doesn't mean anything to us. The Torah is there, and the essence of Zionism will always be there. But the question is, how do we continue to make it relevant for us today so that it's not just something that we learn or talk about, as someone else had once said? Excuse me. And so I was trying to toy with the idea because, of course, everyone asks, right? What does Zionism mean? And for for our friends out there, our teachers who are teaching our student body and our next generation, and for our lay leadership and our colleagues and professionals out there who are often in speaking engagements and are being asked what Zionism means. So, look, let me just say this: Am Yisrael right now, here in Israel and around the world, we are at an intersection. It's kind of like a dichotomy. We're like a bipolar people. On the one hand, we've never come so far. We've never accomplished so much in 2,000 years. Look at what we've done here in this little tiny country, how relevant this country is in the world. And then on the flip side, part of my language, we're kind of freaking out. We don't know what the future holds. We're like a schizophrenic people. Why can't we be solidified in the annals of history? Why can't we be confident that our future is a bright one? Why do we have to worry about where the politics are going, or where anti-Semitism rears its head, or why does the world continue to disapprove of Israel's existence and BDS and all these? Why are we in this situation? So we're in a very interesting time of history. My belief is that we'll end up on the better side of history. That when the time comes and our children and our grandchildren, the next generation will look back at history, they'll look at this period of time right now, 5,780 years to the Jewish calendar, 2020 in the Gregorian calendar, and they'll say that was a turning point. Am Yisrael made a decision to be on the right side of history. And part of that is realizing that, I'll tell you what I think, I don't care about your politics. I don't care about which denomination you belong to. I don't have the right, nor do I have the choice to criticize you for who you are. What I do know is that you're my family. What I do know is that Am Yisrael Chai. What I do know is that we're in this together, irrespective of our politics and irrespective of our denominational affiliation, right? The whole branding thing is kind of irrelevant right now. We're in this together, whether you are in Chicago, in Pennsylvania, in Tel Aviv, in Hod HaSharon, in Jerusalem, wherever you are, we're together in this. So I believe that Zionism has to be something that is somewhat all-encompassing. It has to welcome everyone. Everyone has got, we can't afford it. Guys, we represent 0.02% of the global population. We're like 12.5 or 13 Jews in the world. We can't afford to be so fractured. We can disagree, we can argue, we can debate, but we've got to find this common denominator, and the common denominator is Israel. Israel is the beating heart of our people, point blank, period. So here's what I put together on what Zionism could mean. Jackson, you have a comment? Just 1 second, okay? Zionism is the physical manifestation of the Jewish soul. Education and experiencing Jewish life is part and parcel of this manifestation. Transmission of Jewish continuity and Israel connectivity does not take place in any formal setting on its own. There must be a Zionist experiential component. It is through experientialism that we explore, that we discover, connect, and experience revelation. This type of revelation is very real. Many of us have experienced this, and the revelation can also be continuous if done properly. Continuous revelation, the discovery of answers to questions. This permeates throughout throughout Israelite practice, throughout Rabbinic Judaism, and of course Zionism. It's all firmly rooted in taking action. Whether you're an observant Jew keeping mitzvot, you're taking action. Whether it's Abraham and Kum v'talech ba'aretz and you're rising from the land and you're walking through, it's taking action. It's through experientialism that we manifest our soul. Zionism being the physical manifestation of a Jewish soul. It was only after Jacob's wrestling with God, or God's presence in the earth, that Jacob's name was changed to Israel. For you have struggled with God and with humanity, and it prevailed. This is in the book of Bereshit, in Genesis chapter 32:28. Jacob underwent a transformation. He became Israel, as did the children of Israel, who upon revelation at Sinai transformed to become the people of Israel, and later on to the nation of Israel, all through experiential occurrences, all transformative, all purpose-driven journeys. We can't just sit back and wait for Zionism to take hold. Wait for our children to be inspired because they should be. Why should they be? Today's Zionism is part and parcel of that continuous revelation. And now it seeks its next expose. This is the time, I say, we stand at an intersection right now. We're at the riverbank of the Jordan River and we see the promised land and we got to figure out how to get there. Early Zionist idealism left no room for debate of the future of Israel. Early Zionist thought was fed by visions of a utopia, of an Israel that would be perfect, and once it came to be, the modern nation state would initiate a wave of understanding and coexistence, resulting in a utopic global community. And yet our people's desire to realize the utopian vision of our founding ancestors doesn't need to remain an end within itself. This is rather an endless means of continuous purpose throughout constant experiencing of things. It's a means to an end. There's never an ending to it. It's through this process that we experience Zionism. And this is what our transmission has been from generation to generation. Now, it's a bit out there. But I think that with the realization of our ancestors to this day, the realization that Israel has become a reality, and here we are. Bye, Michael, I got your message. Now we've got to inspire the masses. Now is the time where we stand at that intersection, and we've got to get all of our kids, all of our youth, other people around this thing, and we've got to figure out the way to inspire everyone. And I think for me, that's a definition that works. I want to thank everyone for joining us. It's been fantastic to see you all. Greg, you wanted to just wrap things up for us?
I do. First of all, Lior, thank you very much. I see lots of thumbs up and rounds of applause. I couldn't have imagined a better way to open up this series. I don't believe in coincidences. This week we read from the book of Vayikra, the book of Leviticus. We start a new book, we start a new chapter in our people's journey and our people's story. And so too, in the wake of all that we are going through in this world, we are starting a new chapter and a new journey, but we're not alone. We are indeed together. And so thank you, Lior, for gathering us together in this wonderful way this afternoon, this morning, this evening, wherever you may be across the world. So we are all together beginning this new chapter. We are all reading Vayikra together. We are all calling out to one another together. Before we conclude, I just want to make sure that we welcome everybody on the call. We have some educators who joined us this past summer. We have a lot of JNF and AMHSI professionals. We have alumni, JNF donors. We have JNF partners. We had over 65 people participate on this call. And really, it is a testament to all the relationships that we have in the community and the need and the desire to gather together in these wonderful times. I'm going to a couple more announcements, and then let's conclude to the Shehechianu, because this really is a wonderful moment for all of us. I do want to welcome, I don't mean to call you out, Brian, but I do have to call out one person on the call, Brian Nadolny, who is in quarantine in Texas because he served our country as a doctor on the front lines in Iraq. And is now back home safe, soon to be with his family. Brian's wife, Marnie, is one of our iPads. Thank you, Brian, for your service to this country. Thank you for your service to us all and for treating all of our soldiers. And we're sorry that you're in quarantine in Texas, but know that you'll be back with your family soon. I apologize for calling you out in that way, but we all want to say kol hakavod to you. So just a few other announcements. These calls will take place every day at 1 o'clock with the same Zoom link. I chatted everybody the topics, but tomorrow will be Jacob Leibowitz as a nice follow-up to Rabbi Sinai, although I don't know who could really follow Lior, is Israel's Declaration of Independence, the story behind the story. That's tomorrow at 1 o'clock. We'll continue to do this each and every day for this foreseeable future, again, with the same Zoom link. So please invite your friends, your family, and other alumni to join us. Please, one last time, I want to ask everybody, if you have not, please email me that you were here. By the way, I feel like I'm at services. I'm the rabbi at services. There's always announcements at the end of services, always announcements at the end of shul. Please be sure to email me if you have not already. It's glutkowski@amhsi.org to let us know that you were here so that we can send you more information. Let us know how you heard about this. And let us know if you're an alumni as well, so that we can continue a Kiddush Club later. Let us know that so that we can continue to send you out information. Again, thank you, Rabbi Sani, and let's end with the words, the Shechianu together, a nice little blessing for each of us. And I hope that everyone stays safe and healthy and has a wonderful rest of the day. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, Shechianu v'kiyamanu v'higianu lazman hazeh. Blessed are you, ruling Spirit of the universe, Adonai our God, who has sustained us, indeed given us life and health, and allowed us to reach this moment together of study with one another. Have a wonderful and healthy and safe rest of the afternoon, and we'll see you all tomorrow at the same time.